We welcome you to this month's presentation, Moving Rochester 2034 Forward. Thank you all for taking the time to join us today. The program is planned for 90 minutes, and a recording of this program will be provided and shared with all of the participants. Your feedback is very important to us in helping us to improve our programming. If you are new to this program, or if you'd like to make suggestions about topics that you'd like for us to explore, please make sure to take the survey at the end of the program. And now, I'd like to say that we're very pleased to have the members of the City of Rochester Planning Department here with us today. At this time, I invite them to introduce themselves, starting with Dorraine Kirkmire, who is the Manager of Planning.
Thanks, Maria. Hi, everyone. Dorraine Kirkmire. I manage the City Planning Office and real excited to be here today. So I want to turn it over to my team to introduce themselves. I'm going to start with Scott, and then Elizabeth, and then Kevin.
Hi, everyone. My name is Scott Thompson. I'm a city planner with the Planning Office, and I've been working in the City of Rochester for about 3 years now.
Hi everyone, my name is Elizabeth Murphy and I'm also a member of the planning team.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today. My name is Kevin Kelley, also part of the City Planning Office.
Great. Thanks, thank you very much. So again, real excited to be here today. This is a great opportunity for the planning team to talk to you about how we got here with Rochester 2034 and what we're doing to implement it. And we're going to start out with a general conversation about the 2034 plan, because most of you on this call, I'm sure, are fairly familiar with at least the process, and most of you are probably familiar with the plan itself. So starting with the next slide. So Rochester 2034, as many of you know, is very long and very dense. So we're often asked to summarize this 15-year multifaceted plan into a few sound bites. So being forced to do that, we came up with these 4 overarching themes. First, as we're positioning Rochester for growth, with the renewed interest in urban living and revitalizing cities, we are no longer managing decline in Rochester. There seems to be an overall sense of stability, and we're seeing pockets of growth in Rochester. With that in mind, the plan is intended to help us be ready for that growth and make informed decisions as we move forward and grow. Second, connecting land use and transportation. And I'm preaching to the choir when I say that these 2 urban drivers are linked. We used the city's 2019 Comprehensive Access and Mobility Plan, fondly known as the CAMP. We used that plan's street typologies and the reimagined RTS to inform the land use planning in Rochester 2034. And that plan shows up in in placemaking. And we took a holistic approach to land use planning and created the 2034 placemaking plan. And Kevin's going to discuss that further in a later slide. Lastly, social and economic equity. Every section, every goal, and every strategy in Rochester 2034 considered the impacts on and opportunities for our marginalized population. The heart of this plan is about raising up all members of our community, not just a few neighborhoods, but everybody. So with that, we'll move to the next slide. And we're going to talk about the community engagement piece of Rochester 2034. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Scott Thompson.
Great. So it was important to us that this is a community plan and not just a city hall plan. So in order for the community to feel ownership of it, we had to have an extensive community outreach effort to get as many different perspectives as we could before we started to write the plan. So we did this in a lot of different ways. One thing that we did was we attended the meetings of every neighborhood association in the city. So we asked each organization which issues were most important to them in their neighborhood, what kind of things they wanted to see in the plan, what did they love most about their neighborhood. And over the course of a winter and a spring, we managed to reach out to 50+ neighborhood organizations in the city. We also released a survey out in the community to try to reach the people who may not be members of neighborhood associations. So the survey asked for feedback on the specific topics that we were planning on addressing, such as housing, transportation, parks, smart cities. It also provided a space for open-ended comments. The survey that we released was both a digital and a physical copy, and it was available in English and Spanish. So after all that was done, we ended up receiving over 3,000 submissions with over 11,000 comments that we read through before we started to write the plan. We also met with a number of topic-based stakeholder groups during this process. Since this is such a wide-reaching plan, we wanted to speak with people who are experts in topic areas such as refugee organizations. We met with the Center for Disability Rights. We met with environmental groups, the faith community, and dozens of others. And we incorporated all their feedback into the plan as they helped to educate us for what we needed to make the plan. So after an extensive effort, we felt confident that the plan is community-driven and it would be able to serve the community over the next 15 years, although our engagement process really is never ending and it will continue on until it's time to update the plan again. Next slide.
Great. So in addition to being very community-driven, there's a lot of content. So there's a lot of data and technical analysis and best practices and related planning work that we had to bring in to inform this document. As Dorraine mentioned, it's a pretty long and dense document. There's 20 different topic-based sections that each have their own action plan with recommended strategies and goals. And so to help with sifting through all of that information and coming up with our recommendations, we brought in some technical studies and some companion planning documents to inform Rochester 2034. Some of the technical studies were commissioned actually specifically to inform particular parts of the plan. So that included a citywide housing market study in 2018 that was looking at sort of changes and trends and needs and opportunities citywide, but also looking for differences across neighborhoods and geographies in the housing market. We also did a transit supportive corridor study that was looking at how can we, the city, best partner with RTS and their Reimagine RTS effort to create a network of high frequency transit corridors and really do the types of zoning and other complementary city work and policy and investment to build up density and activity and a mix of uses along key transit corridors. And then also we did a commercial corridor study to look at neighborhood commercial and business corridors. And in particular, this study was looking at commercial corridors in low and moderate income areas of the city, recognize that they have some particular challenges in terms of how we can think about and approach policy and zoning and other practices to support their revitalization moving forward. Then in addition to those technical studies, there were a number of planning processes that were taking place either kind of in lockstep, like at the same time as the comprehensive plan, or that had been finished just before as we were beginning our planning process. And so we worked really hard to work with the teams who prepared those plans to bring all of that information in and include that, not have different recommendations, but to bring their recommendations in and really weave them into the fabric of our plan. So that included the comprehensive access and mobility plan that Dorraine talked about, which is a transportation plan that looked at walking and biking and transit and goods movement and transportation demand management. But also some things that you're not going to see here on this slide, like the climate action plan, which was finished in 2017, just as we were ramping up the beginning of Rochester 2034, and the library facilities and operations plan and some documents like that. So you see links to all of those on the Rochester 2034 website. Next slide.
Thanks, Elizabeth. And sorry, my computer froze up right as we were transitioning into that slide. So it was a little awkward silence there. But now we're going to, Kevin's going to talk about just some quick facts about 2034.
Yeah, thanks. And I hope that gives you a good sense of all that went into developing this community plan and all the different ways that we engaged the community and did a lot of thoughtful research. And I just want to tell you a little bit about what's actually in the plan, some highlights of the content of the plan, and then Dorraine will get into what it's going to look like to try and implement the plan. So as many of you know, the plan was formally adopted unanimously by City Council in November 2019, so more than a year ago. It's hard to believe it was that long ago, since it kind of still feels like March. But yeah, it's a little bit over a year ago, and it was a packed house in council chambers, and it was pretty unusual in that packed house was overwhelmingly in support of the plan. So it was a pretty exciting, momentous night to have that. And also since then, some of you might be aware that the plan won an award through the upstate New York chapter of the American Planning Association for comprehensive planning. So it's now an award-winning plan we're excited about. And really just a thank you to all the folks. I know many of you are in the chat right now, or in the Zoom right now, that that have showed up throughout that process and in the adoption of the plan. So if you're not familiar with the full document at rochester2034.com, as we mentioned, it's a pretty large document because it covers so many topics. It's comprehensive, if you will. But I think that as you go through that website, you'll find that it's actually pretty easy to navigate and pretty easy to digest, because it's very easily broken down into just sort of the pieces that are of most interest to you and your background. So go ahead, take a look at that link and explore the plan. By the way, this slideshow will be delivered to everybody in the Zoom later on as a PDF. And the PDF will include all of the links that you're going to see here, so you can go take a look at things on your own. If you don't want to look at it online, there are hard copies of the plan at all of our libraries for you to look at. And in terms of how the plan is organized, much like a strategic plan, it kind of starts very broad and then kind of dials down and gets more specific. So you start with a community-wide vision, and then we have what we call guiding principles that are sort of broad and transcendent, almost like lenses that we used to view all the work we were doing through the plan and moving forward. 5 of them are policy principles, and then 6 more that are placemaking. That's really more about the built environment. And then after that, it gets into the specific topics that are covered by the plan. There's more than 20 sections, and these cover things like transportation and housing and tourism and economic growth and that sort of thing. And for each of those sections, there's sort of a narrative discussion of that particular topic in Rochester, and then it's followed by what we call an action plan. So those are your typical goals, and then more specific strategies, like the actual things that we want to work on as a community and as city staff to advance the plan. So that's how it's all broken up. And then of course you've got your appendices that has a nice little write-up about the history of Rochester, and then what is like more typically an existing condition section we're calling Rochester Today can be found there, and all the component studies that Elizabeth mentioned earlier. But again, because it's so large and a lot to digest, we also created a Rochester 2034 guidebook, which has some FAQs and some summaries and some maps and a pretty cool in-focus tool that kind of shows specific areas of the city as examples of how the plan might impact those areas if it were to be fully implemented. Next slide. And so one of the more important sections of the plan is what we call the placemaking plan. Now, comprehensive plans, typically the heart of the plan is a future land use plan that lays out where different types of uses, residential, commercial, et cetera, are most appropriate throughout a community, and sort of presents a visionary look at that and how those buildings and spaces should be designed. And so that's sort of the foundational piece of a comprehensive plan, and the foundation for updating the zoning code, which is usually the follow-up step to a comprehensive plan. In our case, we try to be a little bit more innovative and holistic than just your conventional land use plan. And we develop what we call the placemaking plan. That's more holistic in nature, and it doesn't just look at land use. It looks at how land use interacts with the transportation network, with infrastructure investments, with community facilities, parks and open space, that sort of thing. So it looks at all of those things sort of together, all within the built environment. And then again, present sort of a vision and some design guidance for each of those things that we're going to be using to update the zoning code, which is a process that's already underway. So you can go again to the 2034 website, and not only can you read that section of the plan, but there's an interactive map and that's the screenshot that you're seeing right now. So you can click on any of the elements of the map and it'll tell you what the recommendation is or what that particular recommended land use is. So we think that it's pretty innovative and hope you have a chance to take a look at that. Next slide.
Thanks, Kevin. I just want to add something about the placemaking plan. As a practitioner in City Hall for over 30 years, I really appreciate having a future land use plan like this. The last comprehensive plan of the city did not include a plan like this, and I know as a zoning staff member, it was sometimes difficult, and it was certainly difficult to put together the 2003 zoning code without having something like this. And the amount of times that we go in and look at this placemaking plan, it just proves how incredibly useful it is for the work that we're doing in City Hall. So moving to the next slide. So this is kind of exciting. Here's where the fun stuff starts for this particular presentation. This is where we talk about how we're realizing the plan. And what we created here is a simple logo that is specifically for implementation initiatives for the plan. And we're using it now, and we want to encourage community members to also use this logo on projects or initiatives that may contribute to the realization of a goal or strategy in Rochester 2034. Using this logo, we're hoping will help keep the plan sort of relevant and keep it in the forefront of people's minds and see how it ties, the work we're doing, how it all ties together to the larger overall city plan. So we do encourage our community partners to use it as well. And again, it's very simple, but it really says what we needed to say, that we're moving the plan forward. Next slide. So this is where we start talking about implementation in terms of organizational initiatives within City Hall. And you can't talk about an organization without starting with the budget. So I'm really excited to report that Rochester 2034's policy principles show up on page 1 of our current budget. And actually, all the principles, goals, and strategies are listed in the budget even before the mayor's introductory letter to council. And this is intended to set the stage and the expectations for the budget. And during the budget preparation last year, department heads were asked to retool their department key performance indicators, what we call the KPIs, to align with Rochester 2034 goals and strategies. So the mayor's office and the Department of Neighborhood and Business Development, they piloted this new format for preparing KPIs to align with the plan. And I know this may not sound like a big deal, but being in government for as long as I have, changing KPIs is unheard of. So the fact that we are restructuring, reformatting our KPIs is really cool, and it certainly is a testament to the commitment that the administration and council have to implementing the 2034 plan. Next is revising policies and procedures. And again, NVD is, as we speak, working on formally reviewing all of their policies and procedures to check for and create alignment with the plan. So they're working on that now, and informally though, some offices have already been doing this. So for an example of that is our real estate office. The city owns a lot of real estate in the city of Rochester, and so prior to making decisions on selling that real estate, we have now set up this routine process where real estate makes a referral to the city planning office, and we comment, and we specifically look at alignment with 2034 and comment back to real estate so they can consider that feedback when they're making these decisions. We've also revised our request for proposal templates to now include alignment with the plan. And it is now a required element in our proposal evaluations to look at alignment with the plan. So that's really cool. Next, we have added a 2034 reference to City Council legislation. The legislative template now requires a reference to an initiative area of 2034. The initiative area, pardon me? Oh, okay. It's the initiative area that's relevant to that legislation. And last for this particular slide is meeting with community partners to move strategies forward. We are actively trying to foster interest in the implementation of strategies by conducting meetings with community partners to foster their interest and action in a particular topic or strategy. An example of this is we recently met with some health leaders just to informally start talking about health services access in our challenged neighborhoods. This is one of the strategies. This is one of the probably more difficult strategies in the comprehensive plan because it involves so many different partners. So we've just started talking about it, building some relationships around it, and hoping to move that along incrementally. So moving to the next slide, we want to move from an organizational initiatives into specific projects. And so I'm going to turn it over right now to Elizabeth to talk about the consolidated plan.
Great, so the very first project coming out of our new comprehensive plan, which was actually sort of gearing up to start just as the comp plan was being adopted, was the 2020 through 2024 consolidated plan. So the nomenclature is a little confusing here, but they are two separate processes and plans. And the consolidated plan, or CON plan, as you may hear it sometimes referred to, is actually a requirement of the city from HUD, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, from whom we receive an annual allocation through 4 different funding sources that create funding to invest in a variety of initiatives related to housing, community development, youth development, public services, business loans and grants, parks and rec projects, a whole variety of projects. So all of those different funding sources combined, each year we get about $12.5 million. And this consolidated plan takes a 5-year look at what's happening in the city and what are the priority needs and goals around which we should plan for the investment of those dollars from HUD. And because of the significant overlap between what those funds support and areas of focus and interest in our comprehensive plan, the planning office wanted to be involved in this project. So we started it, I think, in January of this year. It was a pretty intensive, about a 6-month process, and that was adopted by council in June or July, along with a document that's called the Annual Action Plan. So the CON plan itself is a 5-year document. We'll have that for the next 5 years. And then each individual year within that 5, we prepare something called an annual action plan that actually says, okay, given the resources that HUD is going to send you this year, how are you proposing to spend your money? So like I said, in this year's allocation, we had about $12.5 million, and that was allocated to 27 different projects across a range of different community needs and investments.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Oh, sorry. Kevin, you want to talk about the ZAP?
Sure. So another really important project that's part of the implementation, and one of the more tangible things that we're using 2034 is to do a complete overhaul to our zoning code and the map. So we're calling it the Zoning Alignment Project, or ZAP, because really it's all about aligning our code with the plan and with the values of our community and that are expressed in the plan. So we've kind of already started this project in terms of getting our ducks in a row and knowing what needs to be updated in the code. We've hired a consultant that has tremendous experience working in cities around the country of similar size and similar conditions to Rochester. And we've started some of the community engagement, and you'll be hearing more about that in the coming months as we start to go out into the community a bit more and have some workshops and meetings and such to drill down a little bit deeper into more detail than is provided in the placemaking plan. Again, that's sort of the visionary foundation for land use and design in the city, but it's not meant to get into in-depth detail and like actual legal code language. That's what we're doing now in the zoning alignment project. So using the placemaking plan as that foundation, and just a few kind of key objectives that we're trying to address in updating our zoning code, really trying to make sure that our code is supportive of repopulating our city, and as Dorraine talked about, before, we're kind of moving out of this period of managing decline. And while a zoning code can't make growth happen, it can certainly do more to stop impeding growth. And so we're looking at how we can support that. Another key objective is to better align our transportation network with our land use policies, and specifically promoting a little bit more density, or allowing a little bit more density along our RTS corridors in alignment with the reimagined RTS plan. And transitioning from commercial districts to mixed use districts, and really promoting a mix of uses in key parts of the city so that the city is more walkable and bikeable. And then also introducing a bit more flexibility into the code. So there's a little bit less regulation, a little bit less prescriptive regulations that are in there, while still being very mindful of community character and quality design. So that's an exciting project that you'll, again, continue to hear more about, and we'll have a website released soon where you can sort of stay up to date on that.
Thanks, Kevin. So the Mayor's Leadership Training Program is a new program we facilitated with NBD's Neighborhood Service Centers. And this is a program that was designed with the help of several members of the community who helped us know what training they need to become informed and confident leaders in Rochester. We then created after we talked to this group and got an idea of what they're looking for, we created the program. And it really aligns with our goals and strategies around building community capacity, which is a section in the comprehensive plan. The first semester was just completed, and the reviews from the attendees were wildly positive. In fact, we heard one woman who said she was in tears basically at the end of the program, and said that she felt like there had been a fire lit on her, and she felt so empowered to now be a leader in her community, and she was so excited about it. So it made it all worth it. So we look forward to repeating this program in the spring semester, and then continuing it twice a year for as long as we have the capacity to do it. Scott, you want to talk a little bit about development ready sites and Data Rock?
Mm-hmm. So the Development Ready Sites website was created in response to several strategies about marketing the city for new businesses and redeveloping brownfields. So you can see there's a screenshot of the website in the top left corner. When we took part in our community outreach, we learned about multiple vacant sites that residents said would have a catalytic effect in their neighborhood if they were to be redeveloped or reused in some way. So we combined this information with what we knew about market conditions and environmental issues, and we narrowed it down to roughly 15 sites that we want to prioritize in marketing to potential developers. So the website itself is a GIS application. It's an interactive map tour where users can navigate the map, click on sites, and gather more information about them. And each site has a link to all the relevant information that we have on each of these vacant sites, such as just basic specifications, any environmental remediation work that's been done on them, information about the neighborhood and characteristics of that. This has been a very useful tool that makes it easier and more encouraging for a potential job-creating developer to relocate in the city. Moving on to Data Rock, Rochester 2034 directed the city to commit to an open data policy, which would be free and accessible to anyone. So this year, the city launched the Data Rock website, where data from across city departments can be viewed and downloaded by the general public and by community organizations. So this includes housing data, demographics, public safety data, budget data, GIS information, also along with any analyses or reports that the city's commissioned over the past 10 years. The portal also has a collection of different interactive maps that are useful for people to use. This includes anything from updates on land use board decisions to the snowplow schedule in the winter. And this tool is continuously being updated with new information. There's a lot there. I recommend if you get a chance to sit down and just play around with a little bit, you should. Next slide.
Thanks. So we're just going to talk about some more projects. And so we're going to start with Elizabeth with the anti-displacement learning network.
Great. So another initiative that we have gotten involved in is this anti-displacement learning network. And this is an initiative, it's a partnership between enterprise community partners and the New York State Attorney General. And they established, there was an application process, so we were accepted into joining this network to gather with a total of 10 communities from all across the state. Super diverse group, everything from Rochester to New York City to Hudson, New York, so it really ranges the gamut. And in the network, what each community did was form a team that included some staff from the local government, as well as some representatives from community-based organizations that work on housing or displacement or emergency services or homelessness. So the Rochester team has representation from our city's policy director, from the housing division, and from the planning office. And then also folks from Catholic Family Center who oversee their housing and emergency homelessness prevention work, from Jordan Health Center, which is federally qualified health center, and from the Citywide Tenants Union. And the purpose of this network is to engage these communities and teams together to learn more about the drivers of housing instability in their communities, and then also to learn about some of the best practices and tools and policies and models from across the country that other communities have implemented to help address those drivers. So it's been a really interesting project. We've been meeting since the spring and have gone through a series of trainings. Hope that we'll have more to announce on that front sometime soon. And then another thing that we've been involved with is work around food policy and urban agriculture. So this is a topic that we heard a lot about in our planning process, and really that communities all across the country have been doing a lot of innovative work on for the last 10 or 15 years to look at food and healthy food and food access and community gardening as needs and as part of what should be included within the toolkit of what planners work on and urban policy is working to address. So Food Policy Council is a tool that many communities have implemented, which is basically a convening of different representatives. There would be community folks, there might be policymakers or elected officials, people who work in institutions that make large food purchasing contracts, like a school district or a hospital. You could have farmers, urban gardeners, nutrition educators, food workers, people who work across the food system to bring those different representatives and perspectives and experiences together to collectively identify what your priorities are and to work on some local food policy or practice that you could implement to help improve food access in your community. So the city participated with FoodLink and with Common Ground Health to apply to, and we were successful in getting into it's a national grant program called the Healthiest Cities and Counties Challenge. So it's a 2-year like planning and technical assistance grant to look at what would it take and how can we form a food policy council locally in Rochester. Perhaps maybe formally as part of city government, perhaps not, but what would that look like in our city and what types of issues would we want to prioritize and address? This is a strategy that, we picked that right out of Rochester 2034, included in our public health and safety section. And then related to, as part of that work, we're looking at, through the zoning alignment project, how can we recognize and legalize gardening and urban agriculture, urban farming, market gardening as an activity that takes place in our city and in our neighborhoods, and that we recognize and value as an asset in our neighborhoods. So like I said, that's a 2-year project that started last summer. We've done some community outreach and engagement to hear people's ideas, what they would like to see with the Food Policy Council. And we're doing some research now on some of the best practices and how local food policy councils have been structured and the types of work that they've taken on to be successful to inform our efforts going forward.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Kevin, you want to talk a little bit about Rock the Riverway updates?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm
I'm sorry. Well, I'm sorry, Kevin. I took us out of order here.
That's okay.
So the City Planning Office is working with the Monroe County Aging Alliance to develop a livable communities plan, which is guided by the AARP. The plan is to look at the county as a whole and its municipalities to assess where we can create and improve assets, amenities, and services for our senior population, as well as take better advantage of the resources that they offer to our community. So we're currently in the last phase of a countywide survey to support this effort. And I want to put a shout out for the survey. So if you're 60 years old or older and you're on this call and you haven't taken the survey yet and you would like to, we'll be sending out a link to that survey as part of this program. So now, I'm sorry about that, Kevin. It's back to you with the Rock the Riverway.
No worries. And I'm sure you all have heard of the Rock the Riverway initiative that's been going for a couple of years now. And certainly Rochester 2034 is very supportive of that plan and its continued implementation. So we've made a lot of progress so far and more is to come. I'm sure you've seen the skate park that opened this year and the photo that you're seeing there, part of the promenade that goes behind Dinosaur Barbecue is a really exciting project. The Charles Carroll Plaza is under construction right now, and we're doing a study in High Falls to the possibility of creating an overlook. So there's so many projects going on right now. Eric Frisch from our environmental services group is managing all of those projects, and eventually, kind of depends on how things play out with the state. Obviously the state is really challenged right now because of COVID, but we're really hoping to do sort of a follow-up phase 2 of some additional projects to get going. So that will have another layer of community engagement when we get to that point. So yeah, excited about that as well.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Yeah, Rock the Riverway is really, really exciting. So the last bullet on this list here is a little different than the other projects we were talking about, in that the other projects all directly relate to a strategy in Rochester 2034. This one is a little different, obviously. So jumpstartingrock.com, if you haven't seen it yet or don't know about it, is basically the city's response to supporting our businesses and communicating with the public while we endure the impacts of the pandemic. And the pandemic, of course, was not anticipated in Rochester 2034, but resiliency is built into the plan. So it has guided and supported the Jumpstarting Rock work that had to be done very quickly. The Jumpstarting Rock plan is divided into 3 categories. It's response, recovery, and resilience. And the resilience piece pulls out all the comp plans, goals, and strategies that, when implemented, will build resiliency to protect us against the impacts of pandemics in the future. So this is an example of how the plan can be a great resource for responding to the things that we can't know will occur in the future. It's a list of priorities and strategies where support as we move forward in that planning process. So
and Dorraine, if I could just jump in there, to use that Jumpstarting Rock is a really great example of how so many of the goals and strategies that are in the plan are not just about what is City Hall going to do about this. There's so many that include important roles for our community partners, for individual businesses and individual households. And we all have to sort of rally together around this common plan, this community plan that provides some really great direction for how we can address these issues. So responding to a pandemic in the future, there's sort of a blueprint, not that it covers every little detail that needs to happen, but it does pull out parts of 2034 that are relevant to that. And in many cases, we need to partner with other organizations and folks to address those kinds of things.
Great, thanks, Kevin. Moving to the next slide. So here we have the call to action. And the fact that you signed up for this webinar and cared enough to take time out of your day to be here tells us that you may be interested in helping to implement Rochester 2034. And there are ways you can participate. And we have listed just a few here on this slide, but I'm sure if you read the plan, you may find out there are other ways that you can participate. But I'll start out with the zoning alignment project that we've talked about. Coming up in early to mid 2021, we'll be presenting draft zoning maps and code. And this is a time when I urge you to come out, and you can either come out in person or you can follow it along on a soon to be revealed website that you'll be able to, there'll be a portal there for providing written comments to provide support for some of the progressive strategies presented in the new zoning code and the map. And so, you know, we're going to hear some pushback. We're going to hear some resistance to some of the more progressive strategies we're implementing through the zoning code alignment project. So we need people who, you know, who will counter some of that and come out and balance what is heard in the public review process. Development review and comments and land use board participation. And I know that many of you are already very actively involved in this. But for those of you who may not be, providing comments on development that is proposed is fairly easy. The development review process is very transparent, and it offers many opportunities to weigh in on a development plan. So I urge you to stay in touch with the zoning office's outreach for development review comments, and make sure that you are voicing some of the, again, more progressive things we're trying to achieve in the placemaking plan, and just, you know, call us on things that may not be in alignment. Make sure that you're putting out there that advocacy for aligning with the placemaking principles and goals. Next is rallying advocacy around the strategies. So consider yourselves deputized. In whatever capacity you have in your personal and professional lives, those areas where you have influence. Start to advocate for and really support for one or more of any of the strategies and the action plans of 2034. This is a plan that was not written for City Hall entirely. This is a plan that was written for this entire community. And it does reflect goals and strategies of other agencies or other organizations in the city of Rochester. And we cannot do this on our own. We absolutely need people like yourselves to start to rally advocacy. And so we're going to rely on you to help us with that. I don't know if my team members have any other things they want to add to this very important slide.
Yeah, and along those lines, in addition to that advocacy, I recognize, just looking at all the folks that are part of this Zoom, as a really great diverse collection of people and organizations. If your organization, whether you work for a nonprofit or institution or something like that, is interested in trying to understand how 2034 might impact what you do as an organization, let's talk. There might be ways for you to find, to sort of align some of what you're doing with the guiding principles that are in the plan. As an example, it might be as simple as, just including that logo of moving forward on some of the work that you're doing, as Dorraine mentioned earlier. We're willing to meet with folks to explore that with you, to see what it might look like for you. You also could hone in on a particular goal or strategy that's in the plan as part of an organization and say, we recognize that our organization can play a key role in advancing this. How can we work with you and other partners to advance that? So take a look at that and reach out to us. We'd love to talk about how that could influence the organization that you're representing.
Absolutely. Anything else from the team on this one? Okay, so with that, the next slide is our question slide, and I turn it over to Maria to help facilitate the question and answer process.
Thank you, everyone. That was really very informative. There we go. Really learned a lot about where we are, and it's always wonderful to get an update from the city and, of course, from you, the creators. I have to commend you on the amount of the the tremendously good work that you've done in creating this plan. I'm pleased to know that it's an award-winning plan, which adds a little bit of kudos and gives you a little bit of that positive feedback for all of the hard work that you've put in. I know that we have a series of questions that have been posted in the chat, and I've been following some of them, but we do have some other questions. Let's start with an easy one. We have someone here who wanted to know if you could share a little bit of more information about the Mayor's Leadership Training Program. I know this is the program where I was invited to participate with you, Dorraine, and what are the contents, who developed it, and how are participants selected? Since you said this might be an ongoing program, I think it could be valuable for us to know a little bit more about it.
Yep, so Scott Thompson and I worked on this one particularly. So Scott, feel free to jump in here. But the neighborhood service centers really were the leaders in this, and Scott and I were support to that. And so they put out a call for applications. They actually, had an application form, and because it was the first session, there wasn't, there wasn't like hundreds of applications. So we decided to keep the class size small. It's a very intimate session. These are very intimate groups sessions. So and we want to have we want to be informal. We want to be very interactive. So the class size I think is around between 20 and 25. And we reserved some of that 20 to 25 people for high school students. So we made sure we had 4 or 5 high school students involved in the program, and we will do the same thing for each semester. And they were a valuable participant in the process. But anyway, so we may have gotten, I don't remember, maybe 30 applications. So we were able to accommodate, 25 in the first session. And we want the group to be diverse and representative of the whole city. So we kind of made sure that it was, we looked at that. And then we moved those extra few people that didn't make it into this session to the spring session. So everyone will be able to participate at this point, and it may grow in popularity. So there may be a little more disappointment. I don't know. We'll see if in terms of people not being able to get into the session they want. And what we did, and back a few years ago, there was a pilot program that was conducted in the Southwest Quadrant that was a leadership academy, and I don't remember the name of it. But it was a similar approach, and we took a group the findings of that pilot project along with this other group of citizens to help design the process. And so we put it together, and we invited, you and I did a presentation on neighborhood planning. We had a presentation from a bunch of partners in the housing field to talk about housing opportunities and options, and how people in the program can get that information out to their neighbors and inform them of what these programs and opportunities are. But it was a whole range of different programs. So we're going to repeat the same program basically in the spring. So Maria, I hope you're going to be available to do it again.
Always happy to help. I was very impressed when I looked at even the lineup for the evening that we were presenting. It was quite comprehensive, and then to understand that it is a multi-month program.
Yeah.
How many weeks is it, like 10 weeks?
It's 8 weeks long.
8 weeks?
8 weeks long, and it's 3 hours every week, 1 night a week. And so we had programming around planning, around economic development, business support, housing. I don't know, Scott, how to engage, how to be a leader. We had leadership training. We had how to engage,
how to navigate City Hall,
how to navigate city, like
how to start a website for your organization, how to be more inclusive,
learning about the city budget, learning about the city organizational structure. Basically, information is power, and we were seeking here to empower people to become more involved in leading neighborhoods, and also advocating for their interests and influencing city government decisions. So that's what this program is about. I think, is Maria frozen?
So I think you froze up a little bit on us.
Oh, did I?
No, I think Maria froze up.
I think Maria's frozen.
Scott, do you know when do you know when the applications might be going out for the next semester leadership training?
I don't know. It should be roughly February or March, that area.
Yeah, I would look on the NBD website in like March to see if you can keep an eye on where the application might be.
Mm-hmm.
Maria, we lost you there for a minute.
Yes, am I back? I'm back.
Yes, you're back.
So just asking Kevin if you could speak a little bit more about the ZAP.
Sure. Yeah. And, maybe I'll just kind of touch on a few key proposals that we're looking to put into the draft of the zoning update as in response to what came out of the placemaking plan and Rochester 2034. I think the biggest change that's going to happen is to the map itself and rethinking what districts we have, zoning districts we have, and what are the regulations for each of those districts. In particular, if looking at the residential side of things, going back to the objectives around repopulating the city and promoting gentle increases in density. And I also saw a lot of comments in the chat about exclusionary zoning and that sort of thing. So I'll try and address that. So our one district has for 70 years essentially been a fairly exclusive zoning district that's centered around single family homes. And we wanted to move in the direction away from that because that has some pretty serious equity and racial implications historically in all cities. And we need to be responsible for those implications and start moving away from that. And so the biggest thing I would say is that particular district, which we're now going to be calling the low density residential district, is 25% smaller than it's been in the past. So big reduction in the size of that district. It's mostly being replaced with the next zone up, which would be our medium density residential, which allows up to 4 family homes throughout that district. But also in what remains of the low density residential district, we're looking to move away from a really key regulation that basically says if you have a 2-family house and it goes vacant for more than 9 months, you can't reestablish that as a 2-family house. You have to convert it to a single family house. That contributes to that sort of exclusionary nature of that particular district. So we're going to move away from that particular regulation so that you can reestablish those 2 families. So essentially that our base district won't be as exclusive as it has been in the past. And the districts that we're creating are really better aligning with, again, the transit corridor, so promoting density along those corridors. Another key point that I want to mention that we think is pretty progressive with the zoning code update is dealing with parking, everybody's favorite issue, right? And what was proposed and adopted in Rochester 2034 is that we move away from minimum parking requirements for all projects that are below a certain size. What that size is, that's a detail that we'll dig into at the zoning code update stage. But below a certain threshold, X number of thousands of square feet of a commercial space or mixed use space won't have any parking requirements. Above a certain threshold, we're not just going to set a minimum, we're going to have a little bit more of a nuanced and thoughtful process about parking standards. So we mitigate any impacts of large scale development on nearby residential neighborhoods. So that's something that we're really excited about. Honestly, we've heard a lot of support for in the community and a lot of concern because it's a big change. So that's an issue that we would encourage you to come out and voice your opinion about that issue during the zoning process. During our Elizabeth, Scott, anything else you want to add about?
Yeah, so I'd like to add a couple things. Thanks, Kevin. So we're adding a new district based on the placemaking plan. It's the flexible mixed use district. And this is kind of a district that we've been, those of us who've been working in the zoning field have been kind of clamoring for a while. And that's this flexible mixed use district. And that is going to be the district that we've applied to some of our legacy industrial areas to allow for more flexibility in how those get reused, so that they can shift to residential, they can shift to commercial, they can shift to light industrial more easily. And so that's one thing. And I just want to give some history to the 2003 code, and I alluded to it earlier, but we did not have a land use plan when we were developing the code that is now the 2003 code, the current code. And there was really a huge public outcry to downzone many neighborhoods in the city to R1. And there were reasons for that, and I understand that. And so many districts were downzoned in 2003. It created a map that has created a lot of problems, I think, in the city. So we're kind of really excited about this new map. And I really want to, point that out to the attendees here, that I really encourage you to look at the progress that we've made with the zoning map. And it's been interesting for me to see that over these years, the change in messaging away from, there's still messaging around keep things R1, and we get that, but there's a lot of new messaging for us around shifting away from that. And that's exciting as planners, so that we can respond to that through this process.
And just so folks are aware, I think it's neighborhood of spring or summer of next year is when we'll have a draft of that map put together that's in response to the placemaking plan that will be able to come out to the community. And we're going to do a series of workshops throughout the city to look at more depth and give you a chance to look at that draft of the map and see how close are we? What do we need to tweak? What do we need to adjust to work towards a final updated map? So look for that, I think, in the spring or summer.
And soon we're going to actually have a website specific to ZAP. And on that website, we're creating some of these little modules about the plan. So the modules are more about how we're letting the comprehensive plan inform and drive the zoning code, and what some of the underlying, what the foundational issues are, and direction for the zoning code. So we have a module on the zoning code and equity, and we're going to have a module on the zoning code and flexibility, and how flexibility is driving some of the work that we're doing with the plan. So I think we'll probably have that website up and running by the end of the month, maybe. We're working toward that goal for sure, so keep an eye out for that.
Great. We will obviously be very happy to share any information that you have. I know there's some concern. I know Mary Coffey mentions here zoning changes are a big concern to neighborhoods, and will you work with them on these changes before you finalize them? And I know that I was invited to participate on a stakeholder meeting. I expect one of many. So yes, Mary, there will be public engagement, and there'll be many ways to respond to information that's being shared.
And the placemaking plan has been adopted into code. You're not going to see great divergence from the placemaking plan in terms of land use. Where you see the tweaking is around the edges, because the placemaking plan is it's not driven by parcel lines. So when we start to close in those boundaries and include parcel by parcel, that's where people are going to really want to have impact over. And there are some places where we diverge because of a closer look at the existing built environment. We may have made some changes to it there, but it's largely going to be what you see in the placemaking plan.
And in a similar vein, and I think this answers one of the questions that I saw in the chat, that as it relates to design standards being developed, because the person pointed out that's not really in Rochester 2034, and comprehensive plans aren't typically meant to get into that level of detail. It provides sort of a visionary plan for each of the land use districts with some sort of higher level conceptual description of what's appropriate for that area, but also supportive photos and images to show what we're looking for. So the transition from comprehensive plan to zoning code update is to translate that conceptual visionary blueprint into legal language, including specific language for design standards. So that is yet to be developed and will be part of this zoning update process.
Great. And I know we had one more. I'm sure that zoning is of course a big interest, but One related specifically to racial equity and justice. So what specific ways are you updating the zoning code to center racial equity and justice, in particular, reducing segregation and supporting deeply affordable housing? Are you considering mandatory inclusionary housing for all new developments?
So that's more, no, we haven't really talked about that yet. But in terms of kind of the stuff Kevin talked about making changes to the R1 zone, where one of the things we're talking about doing is eliminating the prohibited variance around creating another unit in the R1 district, so that you can get a use variance for adding more units, like an accessory dwelling unit or such. And we are also expanding the areas of the city that can allow conversion of some of the bigger homes into smaller units, both as a wealth building opportunity for people, so that they can, start to help have a unit that can help pay for the maintenance of a house and not have to maintain a big, huge house by themselves. And we're taking more area of the city and putting it into the higher density residential districts, and then also allowing that medium density residential to go up to 4 units rather than 2 units as it is now. So that's some of that. We're also, because of this idea of creating density along our transit corridors, that it inherently is more equitable, because you're allowing people to reside along transit corridors, which will help them be more connected and easily connected to services and employment opportunities. So we certainly want to continue and promote that aspect of the zoning map, is this idea of density on our transit corridors. We also are leaning towards, and this is a direction in the comprehensive plan that we're hoping to pull over, is allowing an easier reoccupation of pre-existing commercial buildings that are embedded in some of our residential districts. Back when the city was growing and developing, you'd see businesses pop up in residential areas, or even industry pop up in residential areas. And then it was easy for people to connect with those jobs. They could walk to work, and that was a benefit. And we worked really hard over the years in zoning to get rid of all of those non-conforming uses, whereas now we're going to try and see how we can embrace them in a way that's not going to cause negative impacts to a community, but rather bring people closer to jobs, bring people closer to services and opportunity. So that's another way we're trying to capture a more equitable zoning code and zoning map.
Thank you. I was really excited to hear about all of those things. Monika McCullough had a similar question related to equity issue, but one of the things she wants to know is, how can residents and stakeholders who understand this history and understand the social benefits of reasonably higher density development best work to allay concerns of those who fear this potential change? Do you have examples of education or outreach in other communities that have successfully dealt with overreaching and disproportionate R1 single-family zoning districts? And are there books or resources other than The Color of Law related to zoning land use that you could recommend? So kind of a multi-level question there, but curious to know what other resources you might be aware of that would be beneficial for community members to explore.
Well, we do have we have a consultant on board that is an expert in this area, and will be helping us with reaching out to the community and providing that kind of information, and also populating our website with information on that. And that's also information we're seeking during our stakeholder outreach, is people could tell us what they think is the kind of direction that we should be relying on. And then this creation of this zoning equity module that we're talking about is right now that is our tool right now for helping to educate people and the community about why we're doing certain things in the code and what are the benefits, keeping in mind that we're all city residents ourselves. Everybody on the ZAP team is a city resident. And so we have the same concerns as our constituents, and we want to make sure that this flexibility that we're building in, largely because of equity, and we're still going to have, you know, built-in controls for potential for impacts, and we don't want to, you know, an incinerator to be one of those reuse options for some of our maybe legacy industrial buildings because of the impacts it might have on the surrounding community. So those are the kind of things we are still keeping in mind.
Great.
Yeah, and Maria, maybe that might be a discussion that we continue to have with your group about how to sort of further those education and discussion efforts around that issue that Monika McCullough brought up. And while we don't have any books or articles off the top of our head right now, we have seen a bit, and you know, it feels like a research project, right? And maybe we could engage with you about that, and maybe there's future sessions or things where we can have more community discussions around that to better educate folks on the reasons behind it, and as Monika suggested, to assuage those concerns that this is a radical change that is going to have a big negative impact. We sincerely believe that it won't. We believe that the positive impact will really address some of the racial and inequity issues that the original question brought up.
I agree, and we'd be certainly very, very happy to work together on that. One of the things that I'm really, a trend that we're seeing, especially perhaps accelerated because of the pandemic response, is this whole notion of the 15-minute city, the 15-minute neighborhood. Paris has really got the light shining brightly on it for all that it's been doing to create these, to promote these 15-minute neighborhoods. And those in and of themselves are, again, trying to build communities that are more equitable, that are more accessible. And so in many ways, some of the things that you're doing is kind of laying the groundwork for that, for multi-use, for different, a variety of diversity and densification. So that's all very, very exciting. And certainly it's good to know that we're moving in the right direction. Kind of this leads a little bit to a question that Tom Morgan had regarding, we talked about the 2034 comp plan kind of being the guiding document that we want to use for any future development. And yet there is this one issue, which is just one example of how much are people required to adhere to the comp plan, in the sense that when we're talking about multimodal streets or complete streets, we're seeing this issue with State Street being a street that's not necessarily being promoted as a complete street. And wondering, we know in cities in general, we're seeing large cities and small giving up asphalt to other uses. And yet we still seem to have this kind of dilemma here in Rochester about that. So wondering, again, can the comp plan be a better tool for guiding, ushering some of those more difficult decisions regarding our roadways and their design?
So the city has a complete streets policy, and it's really a matter of how, it's our environmental services department, our street design and engineering, and they have embraced this idea of complete streets, and a lot of times their funding is tied to a complete streets philosophy, and it's hard for the zoning code to be, specifically dictate that although we're starting to embark on this idea and this conversation around creating a unified development code, which brings in a little bit more right of way into the discussion around development. But the comprehensive plan is adopted into code, and I shouldn't say the whole the goals are adopted into code. The placemaking plan is adopted into code. The camp, which is an active transportation plan, that has been adopted into code as an appendix to the comprehensive plan. So we are working on how we can implement some aspects of the camp in the zoning code. And it's just a matter now of advocacy from the community on pushing those those, that agenda. And I know that there are, there's administration support, there's council support for that, but it's just a matter of turning that into design and implementation. So, again, public advocacy is real important for that. I don't know, Kevin or Elizabeth or Scott, I don't know if you have anything to add to that. Okay.
I guess I would just say that the plan, there are different routes that you could try to take when you're thinking about how to lay out your plan. You could say, are we going to put into this plan everything that we can control and we know for sure 100% is going to happen? Or are we going to take a little bit of cast a wider net and put in the things that we think should happen, that we know there's a lot of support for, but that we don't always necessarily 100% control, but then share some responsibility and have an inside-outside game where, we in the planning office and champions within City Hall are working to educate and advocate for the implementation of the plan, but where there's also shared opportunity and responsibility for community partners to do some of that advocacy work. And I think we took the latter approach. And so, as Dorraine was explaining, there are some aspects of the plan that have been brought into code, and those, there needs to be a recognition of that and implementation of that, but that doesn't get to the specific strategy level. And so there are some strategies that there's contention in the community about, or maybe there's contention within City Hall, and there's a role for advocacy to make the case and help to apply pressure to inform how decisions are made. And that's where I think, groups like the Design Center and Reconnect Rochester and neighborhood groups and, all different types of stakeholder groups or anyone who's organizing around a particular interest has a role in helping to rally the troops and be aware, there are hundreds, probably thousands of individual decisions being made at City Hall in any given year, much less out in the broader community. And so we got to do our work to try to be connected and do work together inside and outside to advocate for the things we think are most important.
Yep, I agree, Elizabeth. So moving away from zoning, let's talk. There's some very kind of technical and specific questions that I'm going to kind of steer away from because I think we want to try to serve the general community. But one relative to when you were talking about the agriculture program, Elizabeth, I think a question is related to that, saying, would urban agriculture be limited to plants, or would food, animals, chickens also be considered? So that's kind of an interesting question, and we're seeing sometimes
that's a really interesting question, and it's definitely something that we've been talking about. I can't remember to what degree we spoke of this earlier, but one of our goals with the zoning code is to, we want to be innovative and we want to have a fantastic code, but we also want to look at where do we actually have authority to regulate and where does some other entity have authority to regulate, and how do we get out of one another's way? Because sometimes the zoning code may say something that the building code goes against and people get different messages. And so we're trying to look for ways to better, integrate, but also separate what the zoning code does and doesn't do. And right now, RPD actually has authority over animal permits and a lot of things related to animals in the code. And so we're trying to work through better understanding understanding the code, because if you've ever gone to the code to try to look at it and understand it related to animals, you'll find a lot of confusing language. So we want to better understand that and then think through what is the appropriate role for zoning. And we recognize that there's a lot of interest and desire for small animals like chickens or ducks or bees related to gardens or even urban farming. So we're looking to, yes, address that somehow, but still working through the steps to figure out what's going to work best in our community. And if people have specific ideas and thoughts, there'll be public comment and opportunity to share that, or you could email any of us with your specific ideas. That's totally fine.
Sounds great. Thank you. Bob Thompson has a question regarding what will the process be when revisions are needed to the 2034 plan with the pandemic and financial strains that weren't present when the plan was started. There are likely modifications that will be made. So maybe you can talk a little bit about what the expectation is on any alterations or modifications to the plan.
So we committed in the planning process to taking a look at the plan every couple years and providing a report back to the community and to City Council about how we're doing with implementing it, and if there are changes that are required, we would advance comprehensive plan amendments at that time. We did not adopt strategies in the into code, so that was intentional because we wanted to remain nimble about how the strategies may evolve over time, and actually, you know, new strategies are being created that you know, relate to the goal, but we're not listed as a specific strategy. And so we are keeping track of all those different strategies, things that are happening in the community, happening in City Hall, that are advancing a goal, but that we're not listed as a specific strategy. So I don't know if we'll, you know, we won't have to do a comprehensive plan amendment to that, but I have seen, even now, you know, a year later, I've seen how some of our goals could be tweaked to be more inclusive of what we're trying to get to, or, you know, we maybe limited ourselves a little bit with the goal. So I want to take a look at the goals and where those might be changes. So that would be a comprehensive plan amendment because those were adopted. Mm-hmm. We also will have to, as part of the zoning code process, the zoning mapping process, we'll have to take a look at zoning map that we're looking at, and the placemaking plan, and where that may be require an amendment to the placemaking plan, or does the placemaking plan, you know, get modified substantially because a new zoning map's in play, and that was largely to advise that process. How does that impact the place? I don't see it ever going away, but how does it influence the placemaking plan? And that will probably result in some sort of comprehensive plan amendment. So we need to remain nimble. We need to keep the plan relevant. The best way to do that is to constantly look back at it, constantly evaluate it, and update it through these comprehensive plan amendments. A comprehensive plan amendment requires review by the City Planning Commission. It's a public hearing, and then it goes to City Council. City Council is the ultimate authority over the comprehensive plan adoption and amendments.
Yeah, and just to clarify, I think it would be unlikely that we would be doing amendments to 2034's placemaking plan map during the process of the zoning code update, because really you want to use that as a foundation to update the code and then live with the code for some time to see what's working, what's not working, and then years down the road, you know, potentially revisit that to see. But I just want to emphasize that, you know, during this code update process, we're not going to be moving backwards and revisiting questions that came up during the placemaking plan development, because those were very recently adopted.
And to your point, Dorraine, the comp plan is a framework that is intentionally created to be nimble, as you say, so that the hope is that it wouldn't require a large amount of modification, and at least immediately. So one question we have is, do you see the role of Project Review Committee becoming stronger as an advocate for good design of the architectural edge or the public realm?
Well, I got to tell you, what was very surprising to us in the stakeholder meetings we had with developer groups is we thought they would say, get rid of the Project Review Committee. We hate it. But instead they said, make it stronger. We love going to the Project Review Committee. That, you know, it's a great opportunity to make plans better. We were really surprised to hear that and excited. And so I think we're going to fine tune the Project Review Committee. But it's definitely not going to go away now, for sure. And I'm not sure if we'll give it, I think it'll probably, in terms of the, you know, where it is in the review and decision structure, it'll probably stay about the same. But we're going to tweak it slightly, but it's good to know. And it's good for us to know too. And you know, so we can let people higher up in the administration know that, you know, the Project Review Committee is not looked down upon or scared. You know, people aren't scared of it. They're excited about it, which is really wonderful news for us.
Yes, that is good news. I have a question from William Collins, who asks, does the city anticipate adding climate change considerations into the criteria that the CPC and ZBA use to approve or disapprove applications? I know there are several questions regarding climate change impacts in the plan. So I'm wondering if you could speak to that a little bit.
So I think that's a really good suggestion. And I think we should take that back and add it to our notes around sustainability and supporting sustainability through the process. So I will take that back to the ZAP team. And we did have a stakeholder meeting that included sustainability as a topic. And we are working with Ann and Shawl in the Environmental Services Office in DES to make sure that they're, keyed into the process and how we can pull their work into the zoning code. So Elizabeth, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, just that I think in general, sustainability it's an area where there's sort of like there's emerging technology and new things and systems in place, and we're looking to better understand sort of where and how that's going and how to develop code that responds to that and also makes it easier to approve, whether it's accessory components or structures on property that have a sustainability component, to make that more of an administrative process and to make it more allowable so that it doesn't have to go up through board review, but could actually just be processed and approved. And let's make it work. Let's have the design be good, but have it work as much as possible earlier and easier in the process.
One of the challenges I think with that, though, as much as our team and most of City Hall is very supportive of those climate change related goals and initiatives, it's about what does that look like when the rubber meets the road, and if you're talking about big projects downtown or along mixed use corridors, requiring certain sustainable building design techniques, that's one thing, and we definitely need to consider that. But if you apply those same requirements to very small scale, little neighborhood projects, like somebody establishing an auto mechanic shop or building a 2-family home or something, and telling them that they have to build geothermal or put solar on it, then they simply can't do the project. So we have to have a balanced approach where we share those same goals, but we have to think them through in terms of how do they apply to sort of every scale of project and how it addresses and how it applies to folks of limited means as well.
Well, we have, of course, many more questions than we can address at this time. So I just want to let you know that we will print the questions. We'll have them, with our panelists. We'll look at them ourselves, and where appropriate, we will try to respond to you directly. If there's any interest in having a follow-up community conversation, we, the Design Center, would be very happy to host it. So please provide that feedback in your survey or reach out to us directly, and perhaps, again, we can use this follow-up conversation as a way to continue conversation in general, whether it be facilitated by expertise in the community or whether I or someone else in the CDCR would facilitate that. So with that, I'm just going to say thank you to all of you for attending. I do have a few closing slides that I need to get through, so I hope you'll hang in there for a few. First and foremost, I want to let you know of our upcoming 2021 lecture series. The theme is Building a Just Community. It is, again, a 5-part series, January through May. And we're very excited that our first presentation will be on Wednesday, January 27th. So we hope that you'll look forward to joining us for that. Next, I'd like to tell you that we are in the middle of our annual Give campaign, our annual appeal. A significant part of our budget is provided through sponsorships from businesses and funding agencies throughout the community or even the state, MISCA. But we do about a fifth of our budget is made up by individual donations. So certainly please consider, if you enjoy our programming, please consider making a donation. And I'd also like to invite you to participate, if you may choose to, become one of our Circle of Friends members. Circle of Friends enjoy special benefits, but they're individuals and small organizations that have committed to a $500 annual donation. And certainly having this kind of support known up front really helps us in planning our programming. And of course, I have to thank all of our sponsors. We're very, very lucky to have a diverse group of sponsors and sponsorship levels. I want to let you know that all the money that we bring into our organization, we very intentionally try to spend locally. Very little of that money goes beyond our region and only where it's necessary. So we thank everyone for their support. It all contributes to helping us continue doing the work that we do in the community. And lastly, I just want to thank our speakers and panelists. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day. We really, really greatly appreciate the wonderful work that you're doing and continue to do. And we look forward to continuing to collaborate together to share information wherever and whenever we can be of help. Please do not hesitate to reach out. And lastly, I want to thank Monika Reifenstein, who is our Zoom wizard behind the scenes, and a very important part of all of these presentations. So thank you, Monika, for everything that you do for us. And lastly, please do fill out the survey and provide any feedback regarding topics of interest, other types of events or programs that you would like to see from us. So we look forward to getting together again in the near future. In the meantime, however you choose to celebrate, we wish you a peaceful, healthy, and prosperous holiday season. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.